Okay. So with that, I think all of you should have received the minutes in advance. And so I would like to call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of September 11th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. So Curtis, can you share with us the executive director's report?
Yeah, thank you. How about now? Terrific, thank you. Well, let me first thank the City of Hillsboro and the team here for hosting us. This is a new venue. Appreciate the guidance. Thanks, team. We aren't expecting any emergencies today, but we'll know if there is one. An alarm will sound and strobes will flash, and you can exit out to the north or south, get far away from the building. There's a fountain and artwork out there that are the muster points. There's an AED available out in the hallway here if it is required. I'd like to start by acknowledging the port's, oh, there it is, the evacuation, unlikely event of evacuation. There you go. How'd I do? Let me take a moment to acknowledge the port's monthly safety champions up here on the board. You'll see some folks in aviation maintenance and Bob Holt, who's been out as a leverman on the dredge for, I believe, nearly 30 years. Just incredible commitment to watching out for each other and their teams and our equipment. Some really great stories there for port staff in particular to have a look and see the contributions that your colleagues are making to a really safe environment. I'd like to ask now Nathan Hart, who's one of our airport operations specialists, who is right here. Nathan, you want to come up, and if you do, push your button on your microphone till you see the green light. He's going to give us this month's safety message. Thanks, Nathan.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Nathan Hart. I am a General Aviation Airport Operations Specialist at Hillsboro and Troutdale Airports. I work on a small team, myself, my supervisor, and forward maintenance staff to take care of both of the airports. We take care of my job tends to be very dynamic, and each day can look very different, from helping solve tenant issues, hazing wildlife on the airport, to assisting air traffic control with operational issues. I can be certain each day will be very unique. My primary responsibility is to keep the airport operating safely and efficiently. While the tasks I mentioned previously all take place within the airport fence line, my job doesn't stop there. As you're likely aware, there are very successful economic development efforts in Washington County, which include construction of the tech manufacturing companies, data centers, and businesses that support the industry segment. With each opportunity these companies bring to our community, the construction and ongoing maintenance of the facilities also pose challenges to the airspace surrounding the airport. Construction on this scale requires raising walls, erecting steel structure of the building, placing HVAC equipment on the roof. Performing this type of work requires the use of cranes, and these cranes in turn create obstacles for aircraft by penetrating the protected airspace surrounding the airport. I've been focused with this aspect of aircraft safety by working to streamline communication with local air traffic control, the FAA's obstruction evaluation group, area developers, and construction companies. I've engaged with the FAA in hoping to have some boilerplate language changed on forms that are sent to the crane companies, making the forms more user-friendly with less airport jargon. This work has paid off and has increased the coordination between the crane companies, the Port of Portland, and the FAA. More forms have been submitted to the FAA by the crane companies, and fewer unreported cranes have been erected in the area. Additionally, I've created a comprehensive training program for the crane companies that explains the airspace around the Hillsboro Airport, which helps these companies understand the importance of the process. I've delivered this training more than 6 times to 4 of the crane companies that typically perform work in this area. Continue to work with the team at the FAA's Air Traffic Control Tower, the Obstruction Evaluation Group, to ensure cranes in the area are accounted for as to not present an undocumented hazard to aircraft. Our efforts to partner with the FAA, the City of Hillsboro, local developers and construction companies to keep the airspace around the Hillsboro Airport safe are ongoing. This work will continue as the development in the North Hillsboro area will likely be ongoing for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Nathan. Really appreciate you and your time today. Thanks for coming out. Commissioners, I do in the, I think it is a unique opportunity to be here. A few of you maybe have been here for a commission meeting before. We do, as you know, serve the 3-county area, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County. We like to get out as much as we can into those communities for our commission meetings. This one is especially unique and special this time because Washington County, the home to Farm and Fabs, is also the home of Hillsboro and a very longstanding friend and ally of the port in Mayor Steve Calloway, who's here with us today. Mayor Calloway is nearing the end of his second term and his term as mayor here in a few months. And I just wanted to take some time this morning to thank Steve for all of his partnership with us. It has been a remarkable journey. Steve's been in the community with his family for 28 years. He's been on council for 14 and mayor for 8. And throughout that time, I've had just the real pleasure, I know many people on our team have, of working with Steve and his team at the city to really think about what development looks like, who benefits, who does the work, and really what's the long-term vision for this community. And I just have found Steve to be, one, a ton of fun, but also a great, thoughtful spokesperson for his community. He, before he was in politics, he was a high school, I believe, school principal, which is probably an even more political job than being mayor of the city of Hillsboro. But he's been a great partner in particular around Hillsboro Airport, but also around development and more recently around industrial land and our desire to create more opportunities for job growth for the future in this community. So, Steve, I know this is not the end of your engagement in public life. I know your community is interested in having you do a bunch of other things, but I hope you get a chance to take a break. I'll tell you, we at the port will really miss you and hope to continue working with you on all the issues out here and in the region. And just I appreciate your kindness and your sense of humor and your engagement with us in a really thoughtful way. So I've brought a few gifts for you from the Port Commission and a bit from my personal stash. This is the OG carpet. And I got to tell you, I'm down to, I think, 4 pieces, Steve. So this just tells you how important you are to the Port of Portland. And if you would, I'm just going to present them to you up here.
It is different being on this side of the dais, but I will tell you, you all look magnificent. Thank you. You know, there rarely is there a time when I am out and about that I don't see people from the port who are engaged. And so thank you to you as a port commission for your leadership. Thank you to all of the folks who work with the port, because like I said, no matter where I'm at, if it's ECDEV meetings in Portland, staff is there. If it's out here at the airport for the air show, staff is there volunteering and out and about everywhere. And so just thank you. You are integral to the best times of our lives as we come and leave. And I'm grateful that last night we could land, take that 1-seat ride from the airport all the way out to Hillsboro on the Red Line and come home safely and happily. So, you know, just again, thank you. The work that you do supports us on so many different levels, both as a city, but also as a region, and as individuals. And we're just very grateful for the partnership. And so thank you very, very much.
you. Thank you. I'm so unaccustomed to actually behaving properly. A few other issues, one very much related. On Saturday, the port hosted our inaugural block party out here at Hillsboro Airport. It is actually what we've had as the Hillsboro Airfare for nearly 25 years. Is that right, Kama? I'm Steve, 25 years. Just an opportunity to have the community engage with us at Hillsboro Airport. About 1,000 people came out. It was a ton of fun, music and food carts, but also displays about aviation, jobs in aviation, real engagement with kids, elementary, middle school, and high school kids about how they can learn about aviation. Just a spectacular time, and really want to shout out to the team, Myra, your team in particular, and the operations team who spent a lot of time and energy putting it together. Really appreciate that presence here in the community. I did mention last month at the executive director comments, the East Coast dock worker strike that was pending then is now in the rearview mirror, fortunately. I'll just note that as we discussed a month ago, we didn't have any direct impacts. It's something we monitor because we don't have that inland intermodal cargo anymore. We would love to restart that, but that just was the pressure relief valve for the East Coast. There's still some issues outstanding on the East Coast with the ILA and the port operators. We'll see how those go. I hope they get resolved smoothly over the course of the next year, but I'll just say we continue to have great relationships at the Port of Portland with ILWU, and we continue to really focus on efficiency and safe operations at our marine terminals. Finally, I want to make sure I see this right. We just established a new fund. Commissioners, I think you're made aware of it about a month ago, the Port of Portland Economic Prosperity Fund of the Oregon Community Foundation. It's a real opportunity for us around our own developments to help create a fund that will enable growth and community engagement and economic development in the future. We're really excited about it. It will collect voluntary contributions from companies that buy or lease property from us and then direct those funds to nonprofit and community organizations. It is the first time we've done this, and I think it's a great opportunity to see how it works. We're just really pleased for the opportunity and the partnership with the Oregon Community Foundation. And lastly, I do want to welcome our new Chief Economic Development and Trade Officer, Kimberly Branham, who's here in the front row. Really thrilled to have Kimberly on the team. It's been a week and a half, and we've already thrown the kitchen sink at her. So Kimberly and I are going with Commissioner Sampat here in a couple of days to Asia to visit our business partners in Korea and Japan. So she's really hit the ground running, and we're just thrilled to death to have her with us. So that, Commissioners, concludes my remarks this morning. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Curtis. Any questions or comments for regarding Curtis's report? Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion for a second approval of the executive director's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now reaching the public comment section of our meeting, and we certainly appreciate at the port the public comments and testimony, and they're very important to us. We have received written comments from Brian Schmidt, Jim Lubisher, and Elena, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, Biragazova, which were shared with the commission. For those providing testimony this morning, I ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. This is just to make sure that everybody has time to share their perspective and not duplicate any written comments you may have submitted. The following individuals are going to be providing comments. We have Mickey Barnes, Jim Lubisher, Keel Johnson, Kevin Mashiz, Tyler Hall, Timothy Royal, and Elena Birgazova. And with that, we'll turn the mic over to Mickey Barnes. Morning.
Okay, sorry about that. So Chair Luther, members of the commission, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'd like to enter into the record 2 articles. The first is entitled Airlines, Fertility and Pollution. The authors of this article found elevated levels of PM 2.5 and lead beneath overhead flight paths during the cruise phase of flights. Quote, our findings suggest that even minimal exposure to PM 2.5 and lead from airplane emissions can have significant health impacts, evidenced by lower birth weights and reduced fertility rates. Combined with the growing body of evidence on the high cost of air pollution, this paper underscores the need for policies to mitigate aviation-related pollution, unquote. Oregon, where annual deaths now outnumber births, ranks 6th among all states in fertility rate declines. In this regard, it is noteworthy that birth rate data for the 2 primary zip codes in Hillsboro, 97124 and 97123, experienced a 16% decline in births between 2010 and 2022. Surrounding Washington County zip codes that are also subject to frequent flight training and private pilot activity in Forest Grove, Cornelius, and Banks have also experienced significant birth count declines. The second item for the record is an October 2024 Aviation Consumer article entitled High Octane Unleaded, Where Are We? By Rick Durden. It talks about the disinformation campaign being waged by the FAA Eagle program to block GAMI's FAA-approved, rigorously tested G100 UL from being distributed to airports in this country. It also talks about the 10-year history of the FAA's piston engine fuel initiative to replace leaded aviation gas.
We're at time, so if you could just complete your.
Okay, well, in
Thank you.
Durden's words, PAFI has failed. After more than 40 million in taxpayer dollars, it delivered nothing. I just want to remind you that GAMI fuel is available. There is 1 million gallons ready for distribution, and it's being blocked by Eagle and by distributors. So you do not have to continue poisoning these communities with lead. You're making a choice to.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
your comments. Next, we have Jim Lubisher. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm a pediatrician and I'm here because of Letitia. I asked you to please see my written testimony and to have it placed in today's minutes. I'm here because children that live or go to school near the Hillsboro Airport breathe air containing lead every day. Today, I'm optimistic that this lead pollution can cease within the next 1 to 2 months. I'm optimistic because there are 1 million gallons of lead-free fuel sitting in a tank in Louisiana. G100 UL is the only FAA-approved unleaded fuel for all fixed-wing aircraft engines and airframes, and for all helicopter engines. I'm optimistic because pursuant to the FAA Reauthorization Act, the port can now prohibit lead-containing fuel at HIO as soon as the port provides G100 UL to HIO. I know the PAFIC Eagle initiatives currently have no candidates remaining that they're working on for an unleaded fuel. The cost of G100 UL is offset by reduced maintenance costs. G100 UL can be mixed with current leaded fuel. Distribution of this fuel can be done by current distributors or by VTOL Aviation, which produces the fuel. Mr. George Brawley has offered to set up a 3-way conversation with the port, with the third participant being VTOL Aviation. I strongly encourage this. Perhaps the port can be the first in the nation to stop polluting our air with lead from aircraft. In closing, I mentioned that I was here because of Letitia. Letitia was a 2-year-old patient of mine whose blood tested positive for lead. We talked about possible reasons. When I asked her if she lived near the airport, her mother said yes. She asked what could she do. I told her she could move. She said she couldn't because she was on welfare. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have comments from Keel Johnson.
Hello, thank you. My name is Kyle Johnson.
sorry.
And
Apologize
thank you
for
for
that.
taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Kyle Johnson, and I'm the Vice Chair of Bike Loud PDX. Our mission is to advocate for a city where 25% of all trips are made by bike. And to do this, we have taken a data-driven approach to advocate for routes that have the biggest opportunities to increase bike riding. And we believe that biking to the airport is one of those destinations. If you look at cities that have over 25% of trips by bike, people say that biking is both convenient and safe. Those two goals are how we are going to make riding a bike more accessible to the Portland airport. We are here today to ask you to fund a study on how to complete the biking connection to Portland Airport. With the opening of the new multi-use path next to the MAX stop at PDX, we are so very close to making biking to the airport a possibility. We need to fix the few remaining infrastructure gaps, provide better wayfinding, and lastly, provide better bike parking options at the airport. I live on Northeast 47th and Going. From my door, it takes 22 minutes to casually bike to the entrance of PDX. 80% of that route is along safe, comfortable, convenient, world-class infrastructure. The remaining 20% has opportunities for improvement. These gaps make the trip inaccessible to most Portlanders, but they are solvable. There are 3 ways to access PDX by bike. Coming from East Portland, there's a 205 path. This path is inconsistently safe, but with some better signage is the safest but least convenient route. There are a few intersections that, if improved, would make this route more viable. The next route is via Alderwood, a street with heavy freight traffic that goes through Colwood Golf Course. A flyover bridge from Cully Park over Columbia Boulevard to a new bike path along Alderwood would make this the most convenient and safest route. The last route is via Cornfoot Road, which is slated to get a new multi-use path in the next couple of years. The Portland Bureau of Transportation needs coordination from the port to make this happen. We ask that you assign somebody from the port to work with the city to prioritize improving all of these routes. Alongside infrastructure improvements, we need better wayfinding that consistently and confidently points you to the airport. The last piece of the puzzle is better bike parking at PDX. We need secure overnight options, rentals, and repairs. People must feel confident that they can leave their bike during the day and overnight.
You're at time, so if you could just complete your sentence, that'd be great. Thank you.
Imagine getting off the plane at PDX and being welcomed by a sea of over 100 parked bikes. You would know that you are in Portland. Portland has already shown this is possible at the bottom of the aerial tram, where we park over 400 bikes every day in the space you could park 20 cars. We ask that you dedicate the necessary resources to fund a bike plan to PDX and assign a team to make it happen. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. And again, I apologize for mispronunciation of your name.
It happens all the time.
All right. Next, we have Kevin Matchees.
My name is Kevin Matches. I'm a member of
Sorry about that too. I'm on a roll.
I'm a member of Bike Loud PDX, and I'd like to speak with you about the experience getting to the PDX airport by bike and encourage you to work with local governments on potential opportunities for improvement. My primary transportation is bicycle, but if you saw me, you would probably not identify me with the stereotype of a cyclist. I'm not skinny. You'd see me wearing jeans and a t-shirt rather than clad in spandex. And instead of a lightweight road bike made of carbon fiber, you'd probably see me on a 70-pound cargo bike with my 4-year-old daughter sitting in the back. I'm not an athlete, but I can use an electric pedal assist motor to get us where we need to go, including preschool, work, and the airport. First, I want to share my thanks to workers at the airport. I rode my bike to the airport recently, and an attempted thief tampered with my bike lock. While the thief didn't succeed in stealing my bike, my lock and at least one other person's were damaged and needed to be cut off. 2 handymen came with an angle grinder and cut through my lock. Sorry about that. Looks like a connection issue. And thanks to the help of the workers at the airport, I was able to return home to my family, which I think we'd all agree is a core function of the airport. In planning bike routes, I prioritize safety Clearly, safety is a high priority in these meetings. In my context, I asked myself whether I would be comfortable riding the bike route with my 4-year-old daughter. In my experience, finding a safe route to the airport by bike is difficult. Thankfully, the new multi-use path makes a large segment of the trip quite safe, but this path lacks adequate connections to the regular Portland bike network. Most routes to the airport are not safe for people on bikes. Finding a safe route took some trial and error for me, including using very dangerous painted bike lanes on Northeast 82nd Ave. Another route from the west along Northeast Cornfoot Road is similarly dangerous, but I understand is slated for improvements. I encourage you to monitor planned infrastructure investments and pursue opportunities for additional investments. Consistent with the objectives found in the Port of Portland's strategic plan, quote, build an airport for the future that reflects our regional character and cultural diversity, welcoming, universally accessible, friendly to all, improve resilience, efficiency, and environmental performance, end quote. The biggest beneficiaries of these investments are the travelers like me and the folks who go to the airport for work. I encourage you to study, perhaps even take a trip to visit and tour airports, pursuing international best practices for bike infrastructure and amenities. For example, Amsterdam.
You're at time, so please just complete your thought. Thank you.
Example, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, or London. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And again, I apologize. I seem to be on a roll for finding a way to damage pronunciation, not unintended, but thank you for your comments. Next, we have Tyler Hall with comments.
Yes, my name is Tyler Hall. I'm the field service manager for GAMI, the G100 UL unleaded avgas. My job would be to come to Port of Portland when the product is available to instruct the pilots and the FBOs the proper operation of their aircraft on our new fuel. I'll defer my time to Mr. Tim Rail.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did you say you were deferring your time to Tim Rail? Okay, please, Mr.
Yes,
Tim
that's
Rail.
correct.
Okay, Mr. Tim Rail.
Good morning. My name is Tim Rail. I'm president of GAMI, which is General Aviation Modifications, Inc. in Ada, Oklahoma. And we are the developer of the G100UL high-octane unleaded aviation gasoline. I'm here to provide support and affirm that we have a fuel that works for all general aviation piston aircraft. After 14 years in certification, a small private business has managed to break through the politically entangled technical consideration of how do we get rid of the lead in the aviation gasoline we use today. This has been an independent effort by our company in recognition of the challenges that exist in both the development and the certification, as well as in the deployment. We are fortunate now to have this FAA certification on a broad basis. It's done under what is called Supplemental Type Certificate. And these STCs are available for purchase. And we're encouraged by the Port of Portland's interest in ceasing the sale of the 100 low lead fuel and offering our G100UL. We were fortunate to have visitors from the Port of Portland earlier this year. Both Kama Simmons and Nathan Hart visited our facility to learn more about the fuel and its deployment. And we stand ready, along with VTOL Aviation, who has produced in excess of 1 million gallons that is currently available and will soon be flowing to various communities, mostly on the West Coast. And we appreciate the interest, and we're here to support it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Elena Birgazova.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm trying to turn my camera on. Okay, hi. Yeah, you mentioned that no duplication, but it's about the same. So I wrote you. Hopefully, you had the time to read through my comments. And the issue is not new for us. It's about airplanes noise in Southwest Portland. And our area used to be quiet, and now it's been a nightmare. It's been killing us. It's destroying our lives. Continuous, unbearable, no weekends, no holidays, nothing. We just don't get a break from it. And it breaks our sleep as well. So I can hardly speak because I haven't slept last 2 nights because the cargo planes are so noisy, flew right over our house. I thought actually a war is starting. So how loud it is. Very disturbing. So I just wanted to add to my comment, to be quick, that we have been trying to work on it with the Port of Portland Noise Management and the FAA for 3 years, and they just referring to each other. It's like a vicious circle. And we've tried some representatives as senators, and I was told that a senator doesn't have any power over it. So it's been a big vicious circle, and I thought if a senator doesn't have a power to resolve this, then who does? So it's really odd. And we've asked multiple times to have a meeting with the port and the FAA so we can express our concern, have it at the table, but there is no response. They're just ignoring our messages. And in fact, the hotline for the Port of Portland Noise Management is full. The phone mailbox, and it's been full for 2 weeks, and looks like they're not even looking there, not even clearing the messages. So my final message here is we're asking for a meeting with the FAA and the Port of Portland. Please help us organize this meeting, and so we can try resolving actually this problem. And we've seen the flight path being adjusted due to the weather, or high traffic airplanes, and we see them flying around Portland and not through Portland, which is very desirable. So it looks like the system is very flexible to be adjusted on the fly like that. So why can't it be helped?
If you've reached time, so please just.
Okay, thank you. So so we're wondering and we're requesting the meeting. If you could help us organize the meeting, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Please help us. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your comments. And I just want to thank everyone who's participated in the public comment section for sticking to the time limit. I know it's hard to express yourself in 2 minutes, and we do thank you for your submitted comments. They are read and they are taken very seriously. So thank you for that participation. With that, I will call on Dan Pippinger to update us and Steve Nagy to present an overview regarding the Hillsboro Airport.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us here to talk a little bit. I think since we're out in Hillsboro, we thought it would be a good time to give kind of a general overview of the port's facility here in Hillsboro, the Hillsboro Airport. Steve Nagy, the Director of Airport Operations, is going to give the presentation, and I'll stay up here with him. If you have any questions, we'll entertain them, of course. What's important, I think, to note about the Hillsboro Airport is we think about it as part of a system of airports. It doesn't really stand on its own. It's a very important airport in regards to PDX, and Steve will explain that a little bit. And of course, it's one of the 3 airports in the port's portfolio, along with PDX, Portland International Airport, and Troutdale Airport. It also is the 2nd busiest airport in the state of Oregon, and it has a significant economic impact to the region. So with that, I will turn it over to Steve to give the presentation, and hopefully we'll be able to share some really interesting things about Hillsboro and some of the programs we have going on here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, Commissioners. Vice President Luther, good morning, everyone. Yes, as Dan said, we'll go to the next slide here. The Hillsboro Airport overview here. Hillsboro Airport's, for those who haven't been out here and visited, it's about 900 acres in size. We're pretty much wholly incorporated inside the city of Hillsboro's limits. We have 3 runways at the airport, 2 parallel and a crosswind runway, very similar configuration to what we have at PDX. We have about 20 on-airport businesses at the airport. There's about 50 based business jets and about 300 aircraft in general overall that are based at the airport. As Dan said, he took a little bit of my thunder there. We are the second busiest airport in the state here by volume, just by the number of takeoffs and landings that occur. Last year in calendar year 2023, that was a little over 180,000 takeoffs and landings that happen here. We have 3 fixed base operators. I think many people are familiar with it. PDX, there is 1 fixed base operator. We are very fortunate to have 3, all local firms here, not a national chain, but all rooted in the community here. We have local corporate flight departments. There is flight training, like at many GA airports, that feeds the airlines and both the other needs of aviation system. And we have a Customs and Border Protection facility that we've had over the years that we had closed during the COVID time period when there really wasn't much international general aviation travel. That is in the process. We are in the process of reopening that with the Customs and Border Protection Agency. If there's any questions associated with that, I can certainly answer and go a little more deep into that. But we are in the process now of engagement with them to reopen that facility. On the economic impact area, you'll see on this slide here kind of an overview of both the direct, indirect, and induced. I really want to highlight excuse me, the direct contribution from the airport. There's about 950 direct jobs from those 20 aviation businesses at the airport, about 60 million in wage and benefits, obviously for all those employees, good paying jobs here in the local community, about 130 million in direct services provided by those businesses. And really the big one there is the tax revenue for the state of Oregon from those businesses located at the airport. We have been engaged with the community on in many roles here at the airport and community engagement for probably over the last 20 years of outreach here within the community. We started with what was called the Hillsboro Airport Roundtable, a group of advisors for the airport that was primarily made up of members of the City of Hillsboro, Washington County airport tenants, and neighboring businesses. We transitioned, that was from 2006 to 2016. From 2018 till 2020, we had the Hillsboro Airport Community Advisors, another advisory group of community members, city officials, and that provided oversight and advice to the airport. During the 2016 to 2018 timeframe, we had an airport master plan planning advisory committee, which we had used to an 18-member panel that helped guide that master planning process, which we'll talk about a little bit here in the future of this. And then, as Curtis alluded to, we just had the block party at the airport this past weekend. That was our 25th anniversary for that event. It generally draws somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people to the airport on a Saturday in October. The real goal of that is for the community members to get a behind-the-scenes look at the airport, behind-the-scenes tours of airport businesses, and to see the activities that occur there on a regular and on a daily basis, and also see the types of opportunities that are there, the education opportunities and the job opportunities that are there as well. In 2018, as I talked about, we did a master plan that looked at the Hillsboro Airport and the role of the airport in the community. And the purpose of that was to kind of provide that framework for the future of the airport's development over time. And what was the outcome of that was it confirmed the airport's role, which is it is a reliever airport. And reliever airports are a system of airports in the U.S., smaller general aviation airports that generally surround larger commercial service airports and provide relief so that you can maintain the capacity for commercial service. So business aviation, flight training, those types of activities that are all part of the aviation portfolio, but gives them somewhere in the community that surrounds it. Hillsboro being just one of the many airports in the Portland region in the northwest part of Oregon that surrounds PDX and provides those types of activities. The other thing it does, not just providing that relief, it provides, as Dan alluded to, economic development opportunities for the communities that it's in, and certainly for Washington County and for the city of Hillsboro, it provides that as well. As part of that, we looked at some areas on the airport for new development. We identified that there is a we certainly have the amount of land available for the next 20 years and the amount of facilities necessary for the next 20 years as far as runway and taxiway capacity. We certainly have that capacity at the airport. We have the available land necessary for aviation development for that period. And we also have an excess amount of land, and we'll talk a little bit about that in some of the future slides, that is available for non-aviation development, commercial or industrial activities that would support the community, but then also financially benefit the airport and its goal of being financially self-sufficient. As we talked about, and as community members have talked about, and I know as we've talked about to the commission, Dan and I, unleaded aviation fuel is the future. We are continuing with our efforts on that. As Tim from GAMI and George Braley, who was mentioned here, our teams have actually gone to visit that manufacturer. I don't know how many other airports have gone. We sent our teams to Oklahoma to visit with them, to understand the product that they're developing and have developed. We went as they were going into production for that. They do have that material. That is absolutely right. There's another company that is producing unleaded aviation fuel, Swift Fuels, out of Indiana. We went, and our teams went to visit them as well to understand the product that they are producing. Swift is also it was announced last week that is just got certification for their unleaded 100 octane avgas as well that would serve certain market segments, specifically around the Cessna aircraft, a lot of which are used in flight training. Our efforts have switched now from understanding and the product and what is available. We are engaged with our tenants. We don't, obviously, and I think, as we've said before, the port does not purchase aviation fuel. The port does not retail aviation fuel, but our tenants do, and they are the users of that. Our efforts now are focused on securing one of those users, one of those tenants, in being the first customer to provide that. So we're looking now, we have developed and are working on a draft aviation transition plan. We have held 2 community meetings. We have a third one scheduled for next month in November, where we will share this draft transition plan, which is around enticing one of our airport or more than one of our airport tenants and businesses to adopt this type of fuel and get it into use. Getting it here is one thing. Getting it used and into use and actually being effective in reducing emissions is the biggest thing, and that's the challenge that we face right now in front of us. And again, that meeting is to occur next month in November. Our community outreach team is actually outreaching with some members of the community right now to actually pick the best date so that we ensure that. There will be an online option available for that meeting as well. So we're very excited to share our transition plan for that next month. Noise, as was mentioned here.
I just wanted to add on the last bullet there on, I've asked Steve, who sits on the board of the Oregon State Aviation Board, to really engage with the Oregon Department of Aviation, not just getting it used at the facility here, but really getting a broad transition plan for the state, I think, is the way to go. Because we do know that people will fly to go get gas somewhere else as well. It's not a single airport solution. Obviously, we're focused on our airports, but I think we've really tried to engage at a state level to try to get the awareness up at the state and have the state maybe lead the transition in terms of all the other airports, so that when we do it, we don't just have one gas station that's providing unleaded fuel. We're getting everybody there as well. And so I think not just looking at our airport, we're trying to look at the whole ecosystem and try to make that much more effective, because in the end, that's where we all want to be. So I just wanted to highlight that before we pass on.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that. Yes, we are. We're working with the State Aviation Board and also the Oregon Association of Airport Managers, which is the umbrella organization that represents all of our other airports in the state. And we've had these conversations with our other commercial service partners, Eugene, Medford, Redmond, about this as well, and seeing if they were on board with this initiative to bring unleaded avgas kind of more uniformly through the state, as opposed to, like Dan said, and people are on board with that. And so there is positive change in that direction as well. On aircraft noise and what we've heard from community here as well, the aircraft noise is established by the FAA from a regulatory process to look at from a is a 65 decibel day-night noise level. It's an average weighted noise metric for all noise associated with aviation. When we do that, this is a representation of a 2020 noise model that we have. The blue, turquoise, green areas are all the noise. The green area is the 65, you can see from the graphic here, is the 65 day-night noise level decibel, and the 75 is the yellow. That 65 is the federally regulated standard for whether or not you have a regulatory noise problem. In our instance here at Hillsboro, all the noise generated by aircraft falls specifically on airport. So though we don't have a federally mandated and regulatory requirement or violation of our noise, we have our voluntary noise programs that we have here. We have a fly-friendly program, which is a community outreach-based and a pilot outreach-based program that we have had in effect for the better part of 20 plus years, where our PDX noise department meets with operators at the airport. We have a series of voluntary protocols that identifies which runways to be used to minimize the impacts to the communities, which in this instance is north is to the left on your slide here. So it impacts, our goal is to impact the least amount to the communities to the west, to the south, and to the east of the airports. And so that fly-friendly program, we have that on our website. We have training materials, and our noise department outreaches with both our flight schools and with our users of the airport and our businesses at the airport to ensure that they are following with those, as well as with the FAA tower. On the next slide here, you'll see that in this gives a, next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. This gives us just a representation kind of a typical time period, whether a day or a few hours of flight activity at Hillsboro Airport. You can see arrivals generally come from the south. I talked about earlier the parallel runway that we built. This was built in 2014, 10 years ago. It's a smaller runway located to the east and slightly displaced to the north. And that is where flight training activity occurs. So the flight training occurs to the right-hand side there in the purple pattern, specifically mainly to try and avoid the residential areas to the west, to the south, and to the east of the airport. This was very purposely constructed both to provide capacity for the airport long-term for aircraft operations, but also how and where it was located was structured to increase our community compatibility by putting this type of activity over as much commercial, industrial, and agricultural land, which are compatible uses with that. The next slide, please. We are also partners, obviously, with many jurisdictions out here in the city, as Mayor Callaway alluded to, Washington County, and also with our clean water services, with our regulatory water quality district here. This is just to highlight one of the partnerships that we've done. And over the years, we've done many with each of these agencies. This just recently, in the last year, the port completed a 5.5 acre vegetated corridor enhancement next to Dawson Creek, which is there on the right side of the screen, which is immediately to the east side of the airport here. In partnering with Clean Water Services, the port planted about 600 trees and about 1,400 native shrubs. Clean Water Services is doing invasive species control in this same site to control the plantings along the stream bed to provide shading and cooling for water temperature for the creek itself. And we've also been working with Oregon Department of Agriculture in this area and in the areas around the airport as they have set up detection and monitoring for the movement of the invasive emerald ash borer beetle, which has been kind of slowly making its way into Oregon, killing some of the ash trees. Washington County is one of the primary concern areas for that, so we've been helping them with that. To date, on projects like this, in just the last few years, the port has invested at least $100,000 in these water quality and environmental enhancements on our properties, kind of in support with our partners around the airport as well. Airports are not without investment in infrastructure. This is a graphic here of our next 5-year aviation capital plan. You can see here mainly focused on airfield infrastructure. For that, these are the improvements that we make in cooperation with grant funding from the FAA. We are looking at, and through these projects right here, over the next 5-year period, we are looking at investing, this is about a $42 million investment in upgrades and enhancements to the airport and to the runways at the airport. About 30 million of that would be FAA funded, and about 11 million of that comes from the port as matching dollars to that. Over the last 25 years of investment in the airport, the port and the FAA have made about $180 million worth of infrastructure investments in the airport, and about 40 million of that has just come in the last 9 years. So this is a big, important airport to ourselves as well as to the FAA. Next slide, please. Not only do we invest in the airport along with the FAA and the federal dollars that we take to do that, public and private investment has been going on as well. This map highlights some of that investment over the last several years. In yellow, you'll see some of the land sales that actually, commissioners, you have approved over the last year or 2 years here. The first one is down there in the bottom corner, is just some land that was been deeded to the city in order to make some improvements at intersections and widen intersections for traffic improvements. Number 2 was sale of about 5 acres of land to the city so that they could, they're building their new police headquarters and training facility adjacent to the airport here. The third one there, number 3 bullet, is a 3-acre parcel that was recently sold to the Oregon Military Department as they build their new readiness center here, which will also serve as a serve the community as well as the Oregon Military Department. Those boxes in turquoise represent over the last 15 years the private development that has occurred at the airport, including fixed base operators, a fire station by the city of Hillsboro, and new hangar development on airport. The area in green is the area of future terminal redevelopment along the south side. It's mainly older aviation facilities, but in our last master plan in 2018, we identified a mix of aviation and commercial uses that could be redeveloped on that site. That's certainly part of our plan for long term. The purple area to the top of the screen is land that was identified as part of our aviation master plan as not being necessary for aviation uses over that 20-year period and available for non-aviation. So we are actively looking at the types of non-aviation uses, industrial and commercial, that would generate jobs for the community and revenue for the airport and for the port as well. And then the blue area there is adjacent to the Washington County Fairgrounds, West Side Commons, and the event center that has been recently built. The port previously had a hotel on that site. We are actively looking at redevelopment of a hotel on that site that both supports aviation and that fair complex across the street from us. So really active real estate and investment partnerships with both private and the public communities here as well. And then finally, the last slide is just a little bit of the financial information and kind of update on the health of the airport. We are really fortunate. On the average, our GA airports break even or actually perform well on their operating and their O&M costs. That is not the case, I will just say, for all general aviation airports across the country. We are very fortunate in the types of businesses that we've been able to attract and the users to ours. Typically, Hillsboro generates a positive operating income before depreciation. Our rates and fees that we have are set to cover the operating costs as much as possible while also achieving a balance with PDX and the rates and charges that are there. We want to obviously ensure that our customers here are on a level footing with what we have there. And are typically, as opposed to a PDX and others, about typically 60% of our airfield infrastructure costs are covered by capital grants funded by the FAA. And of our operating income, about 75% of it comes from rent, from land or facilities, and only about as opposed to PDX, only about 25% of our operating income comes from landing fees and fuel flowage fees that are charged for users at the airport. And so that's that's our overall presentation about the airport, about our development and the future. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And maybe before the question, I'll just add on Steve's point, while we're really pleased with the financial performance of the GA airports, they do not cover their capital. And that capital is funded out of the Port Cost Center and PDX. So it's in our interest to have these be as self-sufficient as possible because we send money from PDX out to Hillsboro and Troutdale to support the capital programs there.
Dan, we just briefly speak to what the Port Cost Center is versus, because when you say PDX, it sounds like.
Sorry. So Port Cost Center, generally at PDX, we have two cost centers, the Aviation Cost Center, which the airlines are supporting, which is the terminal and the airfield, roughly. And then the Port Cost Center, which is really all of our landside activity, parking, rental cars, things like that, where we are solely responsible for the infrastructure. And we generate the revenue for that. Some of that money is what goes to support the others, not the money that the airlines are supporting in the Aviation Cost Center.
Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Commissioners, if there are any questions or comments? Yes, go ahead.
Great. My question is about the last slide that you had about the finances. You mentioned that not many GA airports actually break even. Where are we in that grand swath of things? Are we in the top quartile? And historically, how have we performed with respect to this? Are we improving, or we've stayed steady?
So to the first part, I would say that most large general aviation airports like a Hillsboro are, because of the corporate bases that are and the corporate uses and the larger activities that occur there, the types of ones, the larger business jets that purchase more fuel or have more landing fees. But for the vast majority of smaller general aviation airports, I don't have a exact number. They are more supported by they require more support by their local community, not just on their capital, but also on their operating. And so if they're owned by a city or a county, a lot of that comes out of the general fund to cover some of the operating costs of those airports.
Steve, how many GA airports are in Oregon?
84 or something. Not GA, just airports in general. I think there's like 80 plus airports in the state, and that includes public and private airports as well. Yeah. I'm sorry, the second part of your question, Commissioner Devon. Oh, improvement. So yes, sorry. We instituted a program for self-sufficiency at our general aviation airports about 25 years ago, which is before a lot of others did. Our goal has been to always, as Dan said, improve upon that and ensure that we cover that operating our O&M expenses associated with the airports. The problem has always been, in order to stay competitive with PDX and generate enough revenue to cover our cost of capital, which is usually, I think we average our cost of capital annually, GA, I'm going to make a guess here, Antoinette, I think it over probably 10 years, probably a couple million annually. There's some years that are larger than others. There's some that are, we may take a 10 million ask from the Port Cost Center, and there are other years where we have absolutely no capital improvements, but probably it runs in the 2 to 3 million range that it comes out of that. Our challenge has always been to ensure that our rates and charges remain competitive and we don't outperform, or our rates don't become more expensive than PDX, which is another reason why on that previous slide, we are looking at non-aviation investment and non-aviation opportunities on airport land, because that right now we currently have 3 shopping centers and we hopefully will have a hotel, and then that non-aviation development on the north side. All that revenue helps the overall financial health of the airport. And so that's our goal, is to continue to increase that so that we can have better performance.
I think succinctly on Hillsboro, we're making really good progress and we have a really solid base. So this program we've been doing for about 25 years to get to positive OIBD has been very successful at Hillsboro, and I think the trajectory is good. Steve showed you in the real estate that we have land available that's non-aviation, and as we develop that revenue flows to the airport and helps offset the cost. So I feel very positive about Hillsboro's financial stability and our ability to cover the O&M in the future.
Yeah. It's good to hear that, we're YBD positive, and Intel made a significant change in its shuttle operations. How is that expected to impact us in the next 2-3 years? How have you modeled it out? And
Yes, so we do expect a decrease in revenue from the cessation of the Hillsboro, or excuse me, the Intel shuttle. It will have the revenue loss will be bigger than the O&M savings for it, but we still expect to be in positive OIBD, but our margin is much narrower now. And so I think the development of that non-aviation land is really our pathway right now.
to get back to the same kind of margins that we've had historically.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
The losses mainly for Intel for us are direct leases for the facilities that they occupied, landing fees, and fuel flowage fees.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question back to the aviation fuels, which I know has been a challenging issue to address. Two pieces to the question. You mentioned that currently now the barriers to adoption really is reaching out to the vendors. And if you could just kind of share with us the nature of some of those barriers from a vendor perspective, number one, just so that we have a better appreciation of what those conversations look like. And then you also mentioned, enticement of those. And I would just wonder, what does enticement look like? And help us understand that a little bit better. Thank you.
Sure. So in reaching out, we're reaching out now to our, as I mentioned, 3 fixed base operators and flight schools to see the interest level in adoption of this fuel. We've also, and I didn't mention it, but our teams have also had outreach to other airports, to other large users of this. Certain large flight schools that are attached with universities have made the transition. Some have had no problems. Some have had adoption problems and have backed away a little bit from it. So we're trying to learn from that and pass that information on to our private businesses, and as they try to make these decisions themselves as to whether or not they're going to transition to it. There's information on both sides right now. There's people who are there's information that it does improve the overall maintenance health, of aircraft. There are some that have experienced maintenance problems associated with it. They're not certain if it's related to the fuel, but they have pushed the pause button on fully transitioning. So we're trying to help our businesses through that, understanding it as well as ourselves, to get them over that kind of hesitancy to adoption, so that when we do bring a product here, it is fully integrated and fully adopted and utilized. So that's really where our outreach has been with our fixed base operators and with our flight schools right now. And then also, as Dan mentioned, with the other airports in the state and with the state Department of Aviation on that. On the incentive program, we've looked at specifically ourselves, what would the cost difference be between, say, the retail price of a gallon of fuel? Would that be where we would want to incentivize? That's a potential. And this is what we're going to talk about in our draft transition plan that we share with the community next month. There's distribution costs. So in tanks and trucks, would we share in that potential cost? There are certification, because right now, even though they are absolutely correct and the community is correct, there are fuels available. They are able to be used across a wide spectrum, but not all spectrum of aircraft. They still require certification. So you have to get this supplemental type certificate, or the STC. That is a few $100s. That requires visiting a mechanic. And so is that where we lean in? And so those are the things that we are looking at right now is to that. In our discussions with the state and the incentives at that level, other states have looked at making, just as we requested from the federal government recently, that resiliency be eligible for federal grants. States have looked at this and said, should infrastructure for this transition be eligible for state grant money as well? So we've talked with the Oregon Department of Aviation and about, would this be a type of thing that the state should go down as far as an incentive program? So those are the areas where we're leaning when we talk about incentives.
And I'll just add, I think this gets to the point of having a broad lift of everyone moving to unleaded avgas. Because if only one does it, are we stuck in an incentive program forever? And then are people actually using it? We're trying to think of the big picture besides just our airport and all the things Steve mentioned. We're willing to step into that breach, but we also have to be thoughtful about how long we're in that, how much it is, and are we the only ones doing it? And so I think that's one of our challenges moving forward. And that's why we're trying to really, I guess, connect at a state level to say, let's all step forward on this together and share that lift.
I had a follow-up question to commissioners about, so in addition to the changes in the Intel shuttle, have we had any other corporate charters or any other corporate activity that's changed or has deviated? And how has the business been affected since kind of the pandemic? Did it decrease substantially because of corporate travel isn't increasing? What's the trend?
Excellent question, Commissioner. Immediately following and during the early periods of COVID, actually business aviation, as far as private business aviation, was doing actually quite well, because if you think about it, many people did not want to travel on a commercial airplane. So if you could, and you could charter aircraft, that stayed very viable for the 2020, 2021, 2022 timeframe. Airlines still needed pilots. Flight training was still occurring. So general aviation did not take as big of a hit during the early parts of the pandemic as commercial aviation and the airlines did. And it certainly has come out. We are at activity levels at Hillsboro, certainly, that are no different than they were in 2019. I'd have to go back and look at the number, but I believe we were like 6% up as far as operations last year. From a revenue perspective, we haven't had really, in a leasing perspective, we haven't had significant changes in our operators who have come and gone. We have a few new leases. In fact, we are completing a few for assignment of some building leases. So activities have stayed the same, business level aviation activities. Intel is kind of the anomaly. They had run essentially their own corporate air shuttle for their employees and have pulled back from that. But the other levels of activities for our other businesses all seem to be relatively equal to or slightly better than they were in 2019.
Very good. Thank you.
Seismic program for the port at large. The land soils out here are better suited than we are at PDX for sure. That doesn't necessarily mean that the runway, for example, will not need to be repaired, but we don't expect the big uneven settlement that we're going to get at PDX, hence the seismic resilient runway that we're pursuing. That said, when we think about regional plans for and the capacity, when we work with FEMA and the Department of Defense, who will get the charge from FEMA to move things in and out, their preference is PDX. The Hillsboro Airport is not big enough to really facilitate the lift and the types of aircraft that would need to be coming in. So I think when I think about it, and I wouldn't say, I'm not putting this on the state or the federal government, but I think about it, PDX would be your hub. It's certainly what FEMA and DOD believe is the most important and critical thing for the state. But you would then use maybe this as an auxiliary airfield for helicopter traffic or something like that, but only after you established your main base. But from a soils perspective, better off out here than where PDX sits next to the river.
When we did the runway reconstruction in 2019, we spent some extra time looking at that seismic question because we do know that the soils out here are more stable than they are. I think if I'm trying to remember back to that, I'm looking at Dan over there. I think that the north end of the runway had a settlement factor of between 1.5 and 3 inches, and the south end was slightly worse, between like 3 and 5 inches, which is significantly better than what we expect the soils to perform anywhere else, in the Portland metro area. So yes, to Dan's point, PDX will be established as the hub, but out of PDX, hubbing out of that will be resources going to many places throughout the state, especially here on the west side, if bridges are compromised across the Willamette. Air bridges between PDX and communities in Washington County or further down the valley will continue. And so having that regionalized function will be beneficial, but it will not be the national distribution hub type of thing. And so we have been working with the state. We have been working with FEMA as they make their plans associated for this region and for Washington County.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Sampa.
Yeah. Going back to our previous discussion, clearly transition to lead-free fuel is important. So as you've talked to the suppliers of these fuels and looked at other airports, are there any examples that stand out in terms of transition for a training school or training academy? And what can we learn in terms of incentives, regulatory changes? And you may not have an answer right now, that's okay, but it'd be good to hear what we know so far and then maybe come back as to, is there something that we can follow in the future?
I think the number one thing, we can talk about incentives and those types of things and come back with you for that. The number one thing has been finding a level of adoption at that facility or with that community, that airport community, that sustains that use. So if you have high volume users of this type of fuel, to get that on board, because that will drive that incentive. So if you have someone that is a high user of that, like a flight school or a fixed base operator, if you can sustain that and get that involvement, that's the number one thing for success. So that's kind of where we're leaning to. I think that's some of the things that we learned from talking with other airports. And I'm looking at our team that also has talked with the other airports. Yeah.
And is there an airport that stands out today in having done that transition nationally?
No one that really, I'm looking at Cam, no one that has done it and had high success. They're all still providing both grades of fuel. They're all still, they've had a high, some of them have had higher levels of adoption. Utah State, I believe, is one. Utah Valley State, which is a aviation education university. They've certainly had success. There's been a few airports in California that have been successful as well, but we can come back with those details.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Strader.
What is the percentage between the flight school and between the commercial aviation that comes as far as working or flying over the local community proportionally?
We have to get back to you on that because we don't keep that information. We base off that 180,000 count is solely off of the FAA's tower count, as so aircraft that take off and land from Hillsboro. We can estimate that number based on how many stay here, how many aircraft stay and do local, flight training type of thing, but we're not certain how much of it then goes out of area, that flight training, and occurs at other places. But I'll have to get you the number of the breakout between the local flight activity and the transient one that goes out of area. But the one that goes out of area, the FAA doesn't ask them, are you flying to Salem just to have lunch, or are you flying there to do flight training today? So we have to make an assumption based on some of the percentage of that. Yes, yeah. The largest user level of activity that occurs at Hillsboro is probably flight training, followed by corporate flight activity.
What is their flight path generally? I know you don't run their school, obviously, so you don't, but their flight path, is it in the localized area? Is it generally to Salem, to back in that type, or is it more localized to the Hillsboro community itself?
So when it's local, it stays within the flight pattern areas here, mainly to the east side of the airport, like on this graphic here. Occasionally they will fly to the main runway, which means they'll fly, that pattern is flipped over and goes over to the community on the west side of the airport. That's not our choice. That's not our preference. That's why we built the other runway. That's why we have conversations with the flight school to fly over the more resident or the non-residential, the industrial and commercial and agricultural areas north and east of the airport. Happy to share with you from our noise department and what looks like an average day. They can have flight tracks for the entire area. It covers the entire area. It's not specifically covering one or pointing towards one area. Flight training generally likes to occur over less commercial or residential areas, just for the idea of having more airspace available to them. So training will go out to the west and go over the Cascade Range. It will go north towards the Willamette and Columbia rivers. It will go further south. I'm happy to provide our noise department to kind of just give you like a one-day look. And the spaghetti that is that little purple pattern will go all over the entire Willamette Valley at any given time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you. I really appreciate your ability to address our questions and give us a sense of the operations here out in Hillsboro. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we have one consent item on the agenda today, and I'd like to ask if any commissioner would like a presentation of the consent item. Seeing none. I will read the title of the consent item, which is approval of Port of Portland's applicant for Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District Board. With that, I would call for a motion and second for approval of the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. With that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.